Welcome to the Chasing Thoughts podcast. Listen in as Mindy, Keith, and their guests take a deep dive into their own minds and souls to investigate the beauty of imperfection, challenge their beliefs, and embrace the richness of living a truly authentic life. Welcome to Chasing Thoughts.
Hey, hello, everybody. Welcome to Chasing Thoughts Season 2, Episode 21. And we are joined today by John. John, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, Mindy. It's great to meet you, and I really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you. It's a great honor.
So Keith and I are really passionate about self-improvement, I guess, but sometimes I hesitate to use that word. Self-acceptance, I guess, is more important. Self-acceptance first.
Yes.
Right. We don't need to be improved upon. There's nothing wrong with us, but we're both seekers and we love this journey of life. And that's really what attracted me to your profile, John, is that I felt that same love of being a human on this journey. And so
it's a great privilege and a great honor.
Give us kind of a recap of your life and let our listeners, hear that same thing that I really witnessed, your passion and love for being a human.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, here we go. Well, I was born in 1965. I'm 58, believe it or not. And I always felt that I was meant to do something creative with my life. I grew up in the 1970s and I was a huge comic book nerd. I was really into Marvel and DC Comics. And it was a very different time. It was kind of stigmatized back then. So I didn't like sports. I had no interest in hockey. I'm probably the only Canadian boy that's not watching the playoffs right now. It's just not, I have nothing against sports. I think sports are awesome. That aspect did not come with me to this corporeal body. I've always been an artsy fartsy nerd. And so I wanted to be a comic book artist when I was a boy. And I drew every day after school, but I got lazy and I gave it up. I guess I was too extroverted back then. And then after high school, I didn't really have a solid game plan for myself. And I really envied all the other kids that knew exactly what it was that they wanted to do with their lives. I was kind of scattered. And then in my early 20s, I took acting for a couple of years. There was an acting school called the Breck Academy. And one of the stars of that show, Peter Breck, probably before your time, you look quite young, but there was a Western from the late, an American show called The Big Valley. Maybe Keith remembers that show. And one of the stars of that show, Peter Breck, he came to Vancouver. He started this acting school called the Breck Academy. And that was an amazing experience. I had an agent and I was going to auditions. And I was doing some writing back then too. I was writing scenes for my acting partners and myself. And I was writing my own monologues. And very often, and I don't mean to be overly self-aggrandizing, but I would go to the auditions and not get the part. But the casting directors would say, well, I never heard that monologue before. Because, they would hear the same monologues over and over again. I said, well, it's because I wrote it. And they always seemed to be impressed by that. And so I was an extra in Rocky IV. That was kind of my 15 minutes of fame. Yeah, I know. That always gets a reaction that I like. So the big fight at the end, which, thank you. You don't see me in the movie, but I was there for one day. The big fight with Ivan Drago was shot at the Agrodome in Vancouver. There was an open casting call. So me and my buddy Jeff went. We had an amazing time. And here's where the story gets a little bit dark. I don't mean to gross you or any of your listeners out. Do you know what psoriasis is? Do you know what that is? So, Of course, for some of your listeners, psoriasis is a skin malcondition where some of our bodies generate far more dry skin than what would be considered normal. So I used to be very overweight. I used to weigh anywhere from 235 to 250 pounds. I'm a recovering sugar addict. And I just stressed out over every little thing. And my half glass of water tended to be half empty. And so it just got to be so bad that literally huge chunks of skin were coming off my face. And so I gave up on my dream of acting. And so for the last 35 years, believe it or not, I've been working as a security guard. I mean, that's been my bread and butter job. I always knew that I could do better. I tried to fill my head with as much positive information as I could. I was reading all these self-help books by Anthony Robbins, Awaken the Giant Within and Unlimited Power, and listening to the tapes and doing the exercises. And I would make every once in a while, I would take a step forward, but then I would take 2 steps back. I was just kind of going in circles. And I carved out this niche for myself where I was just making enough money to keep myself afloat and coming home after work and plonking myself down on my couch and watching my DVDs and then my Netflix for a while and just pounding down junk food every night. It's a wonder that I'm still alive. And then in 2019, my life changed. Now, here's where the story gets a little bit weird for some people. And I want to make it very clear that I'm Canadian, and Canadians, we're very tolerant, very respectful. I don't mean to be stereotypical, but if you're an atheist or an agnostic, if this sounds completely harebrained to you, that's absolutely fine. But this is a mindset that has aligned me with the John Leister that I always knew that I could be, which is this. I reached out to God and I said, Our Heavenly Father, I've heard about you my whole life. I don't know if you're real or if I'm talking to myself right now, but I'm the kind of person who tries a little bit harder. I'm sorry if I filibuster, you can cut me off at any moment. Who tries a little bit harder when I have it in my mind's eye that someone who loves me and accepts me unconditionally for who I am is rooting for me to manifest whatever it is that's bubbling around inside our brains. Because when we don't do that, we suffer, right? And I'm speaking from experience, not from a place of judgment. So just to backpedal a little bit, around 2005, I wrote a whole bunch of short stories. I wrote about 60 short stories about a private investigator named Lee Hacklin. And I made some hard copies, and thank goodness I did this. And I stuck them in my bedroom, and the pages curled and they yellowed. And then after I reached out to God and asked him to help me, and I don't know if you or Mindy do any creative writing. It's hard to be objective about your own stuff. But I dusted off these short stories and I read them. And I thought, gosh, I mean, I know these are not great literature, but I know that if someone else's name, like written by Joe Blow, I know I would like them. At least I would like them. And so if I would like them, maybe there's one other person in the world who might think that they're not total garbage. So that was the beginning of my journey, my true life's journey of becoming a manifester. And it was a tremendous uphill battle for me to get that first book posted. I thought, this is an important life lesson. When we begin on a new creative endeavor, we have to prepare in advance in our minds that there are going to be hiccups along the way and that it's okay. It's the hiccups and the potholes that make our lives interesting. I mean, if you watched a movie and nothing bad ever happened to the hero, it'd be pretty boring movie, right? We want to see how the protagonist is going to get out of whatever situation he or she happens to be in, right? That's what makes it good. That's what makes it interesting. If everything was smooth sailing, it would be pretty dull, right? So I was going in circles for about a month. I was trying to get my first book, plug. There you go, shamelessly plugging his product. My first book is called The Collected Cases of Lee Hacklin, 1970s Private Investigator, Book 1. And I was dealing with Amazon and they were rejecting my banking information. They go to the bank and they say it's the right information. Now, if there's such a thing as parallel universes or parallel timelines, like Back to the Future or Star Trek, right? If there was a parallel timeline where I was doing this and I didn't have God in my life, I hadn't taken this leap of faith, knowing who I was back then, I would have given up after 2 or 3 tries. Because even though I knew better, even though I'd read all these self-help books, I was in therapy for a year and I found that to be very beneficial. I was too emotionally invested in this lethargic lifestyle. But because I had God in my life, kind of like Big Brother from 1984, Big Brother is watching you, but in a good way, right? Like Yoda and Luke Skywalker, right? Not in a harsh, punitive, throw him in the Iron Maiden kind of way, right? It's like, hey, don't give up. And when I saw on the screen for the first time, congratulations, your ebook has been published. I mean, I lost my mind for real. I was just walking on air and I thought, gosh, so that's what this feels like. Starting something and there were hiccups along the way. And for once in my darn life, I didn't bail. I actually stayed the course and crossed the finish line. Have you seen the movie Billy Elliot about the boy who wants to be a ballet dancer? Have you seen that movie?
No.
I really recommend it. It's a very beautiful film. So just in a nutshell, it's about a boy who grows up in a small mining town in London, England in the early 1970s, and he wants to be a ballet dancer. And his dad's a very alpha male. He's not very enlightened, but initially he comes around, and spoiler warning, and he takes Billy to this ballet school, and the auditioners ask Billy, how do you feel when you dance? And he says, I feel like electricity. And that's how I felt, Mindy and Keith, when I posted that first book for the first time. I felt like electricity. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm 53 years old. I don't know how many years I have left. I'm lucky I made it this far. I want to feel this way all the time. So now it's 2024 to bring it up to present day. And I've got about 100 of these books online. And now, granted, they're not very long. Some of them are 30 or 40 pages long. At the end of the day, what I'm writing is pulp fiction. It's good guys and bad guys. It's the kinds of stories that I grew up with. And I feel like, and I don't mean to get on my high horse about this, but I feel like that Hollywood is not really interested in these kinds of stories. They're more about being woke and politically correct and sucking up to this group and that group. I like to think that my stories have universal values and universal, like all the comic books that I read as a boy, good and evil. Those are not abstractions to me. They're concretes and they apply to everyone equally, in my opinion. So that's my story in a nutshell.
There is so much I love about what you said.
Thank
I
you.
was furiously writing notes so that I didn't want to forget what I wanted to say. So first, at the beginning of your story, you referenced one of your personality traits and you said something like, well, that just didn't come into this package of me as a human. And I love that so much. And that it's actually a pretty new way of thinking for me, where I'm like, I don't know, consciousness in this body just likes this. Like it just wants to do this. Like just that almost surprising relationship with my own authentic self as I let myself come out into the world without me
Mhm.
trying to monitor how that looks.
And
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 that is just so freaking beautiful.
thank you.
Yeah.
And what stops us from doing that? It's our mindsets. We're
Mhm.
afraid of being criticized. We're afraid that people are going to make fun of us. Oh, we might lose our friends. I remember when I and here's another thing. I lost 65 pounds. I used to be very overweight. After I reached out to God, vegetables started to look very attractive to me because when you love yourself, that will motivate you to want to take care of yourself. So the
Yeah.
pizza and KFC was not so appealing to me anymore because I knew that I was rushing myself to an early grave. So I started posting videos and I started lifting weights like crazy. I do yoga and I lift weights 2 or 3 times a week. And I post videos of myself doing that on my Facebook page. And I remember when I started doing this in 2019, I was really scared. And very shortly after I posted my first video, I got a phone call from my employer, the accounts manager, and my heart started pounding. And I thought, oh crap, someone's seen this video and they don't like it because I work in security. I work in the security industry, and it's a very conservative industry. I mean, it's just the nature of what it is, right? And I don't think they're going to fire me. And oh my God, what have I done? And it was just, I picked up the phone. He's like, hey, John, we need you to work another shift next week. Can you do that? Like, it's just these absurd, all right? These absurd. And what if
Mhm.
they did fire me? So what? You just get another job, right? It's not the end of the world. And this is why so many people are unhappy because they're, and I'm not speaking from judgmentalism. I'm speaking from my own experience. They're walking around who was it? Henry David Thoreau said the massive men lead lives and women lead lives of quiet desperation because they have the desire to do something. And whether it's writing a book or doing a podcast, or maybe they want to get their pilot's license, or maybe they want to go back to school, or they want to start a business. They want to do that thing that's far beyond their grasp. But then they have it in their mind say, oh, if I try, like when I started making these changes in my life, I reached out to so many people, and it's like people I'd had great conversations with about movies and pop culture and comic books and all the geek stuff. Hey, let's do a podcast. Every single, and this is as diverse a group of people as you can imagine, men and women. Every reaction I got was exactly the same. Oh, I don't know. I'm too busy. Gosh, I got this. Like, and I don't blame them because they're too emotionally invested in the way and it's human nature.
Yep.
We get into our routines. And then something comes along, and it could be a really amazing and really exciting, but all we're thinking about is like I could have said to myself, well, I shouldn't write because if I write a book and it becomes a bestseller, someone will sue me for plagiarism. Or if I write a book, someone might be offended by something that I've written and they might sue me because I hurt their feelings. Just, again, it's just all these obstacles that we create in our minds. And so we as individuals have to develop a mindset that works for us so that we can be in sync with whatever it is that we want to do with our lives. And that's what makes the world a brighter place. Oh, sorry, just spat on the phone. Are you still there? We're setting an example for other people to follow. And here's another thing. People will make fun of you and they will criticize you. The stone throwers and the bench warmers, and you just be like Arnold Schwarzenegger. When imagine Arnold Schwarzenegger back in the day, growing up in Graz, Austria, he told all his friends and family members, I'm going to go to America and I'm going to be a professional bodybuilder and I'm going to be a movie star and then I'm going to be a politician. And he achieved every single one of those goals in spite of the fact that everybody made fun of him and mocked him and told him he was crazy. You've got to turn all that negativity into gasoline on the fire of your passion of whatever it is that you want to do with your life. And it's not too late. I'm 58. I don't know how old you are, but that probably sounds like a pretty advanced, age, and it is on a comparative scale. But we have to live our lives in the here and now. There was a philosopher named Stuart Wilde, who's a British kind of stand-up comic, kind of motivational speaker. And I love this idea he has of the eternal now, that we just live our lives in the present. Never mind the past. As soon as we start thinking about the past, it really doesn't matter if it's a happy memory or a sad memory. We're going to feel sad. And those feelings disempower us. And they disempower other people too, because you can walk around with a big smile on your face, which is nice, but people pick up on those feelings of inner angst and it disempowers them too, right? If we think about the future, maybe it's just me, we tend to worry because of the unknown. I try to keep my mind on the here and now, and I have faith that I'm on the right path of my life. And that's what's worth it. Because we talked about this in the pre-interview, our destinations are all the same. I don't care who you are. We're all headed for the same place. These bodies that our spirits are inhabiting, they're like cars, right? They're going to conk out. They're not going to work anymore. And that's it. And then it's on to the next adventure. You know, once you're, you know, people like to say it's never too late. And I like that. It's positive. But at a certain point, it is too late. You know, if you're 120 years old and you can't tell the time, you know, you need 24-hour care. That's it. You know, you're done. You had 120 years. And if all you wanted to do was mop a floor, well, you know, we reap what we sow in life, right? But, you know, Herman Wouk, who's one of my favorite novelists, he wrote his last novel when he was 100 years old. You know, and Jack LaLanne, who's one of my idols, he died working out. He lived to 97, one of the absolute most self-believing individuals who ever lived. If I'm telling the story correctly, he died doing the thing he loved to do most, which was to exercise. And I will never retire. I will never stop writing. I've got a million more ideas for future Lee Hackland stories. I'm in sync with the John Leister that I want to be, and I believe in myself. And if I didn't believe in myself, I wouldn't be reaching out to nice people like you and Keith. You know, I'd be sitting at home right now watching season 10 of Mandalorian and pounding down tons of junk food. And my inner monologue would be, what if? What if? That's the old John Leister. That's the John Leister that's gone. This is the present day. And I'm cool with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that you are so right. And Keith and I joke about this all the time, that when it comes down to it, it's a binary choice, like Keith says, right? It's yes or no. It's, am I going to do this? Am I going to choose something different? Right? Am I going to stop these habits that might be really comfortable, that are hard to stop? And it's,
you know, back in the day, I thought I was having fun. You know, I'd come home after work with my stack of DVDs and just losing myself. Because for some of us, stories are a much more immersive experience, right? And I thought it was, I would have these moments of clarity every once in a while, but I was just too emotionally invested. My life now is so much more fun. And that's part of my mission statement. If you're not happy, it's because you're not doing. You know, if you think about what you want to do and you just think about it, again, you're going to suffer. You're going to have all this inner turmoil. But once you start doing it and then you make this discovery, it's like, hey, this is so much more fun than being a passive. I remember someone once said to me, you know, John, you're a very passive guy. And I really didn't like hearing that. I don't think anyone really wants to be thought. She meant it as a compliment, I think. But I realized that she was right. And now I'm much more proactive, at least on a comparative scale. And it's so much more rewarding. It's so much more satisfying. And the feedback, I'm in hundreds of Facebook writers groups around the world, and just being a part of this creative community of people like myself. And when I say people like myself, I don't care about anyone's political beliefs. I don't care if you're an atheist or if you believe in God as I do. What I do care about is that you believe in yourself and that you have the same kind of positive energy that I like to have. I'm not really so keen about being around people who have nothing to talk about other than how much they hate their jobs and their pet peeves and world events. And here's another thing after I reached out to God. I stopped watching the news. I literally, like, it took a 100% just cut off from watching the news, other than just like the geeky stuff. Because I used to listen to all these very political podcasts, you know, the Johnny Ken show and the Ben Shapiro show and Alex Jones. I used to listen to Alex Jones every day. You know, the conspiracy guy, the globalists are taking over. I used to listen to this stuff every day. And it was stimulating and it was entertaining, but it was also driving me crazy because it's all the madness and the corruption and the chaos of the world. I mean, I look around Vancouver right now, you know, the Starbucks that I'm at right now, I see peace. You know, the news is never going to report that. The more that we disengage from what's around us that's negative, the more that we focus on what's beautiful about life. And that's motivating. And again, it's all about motivation. It's all about having a mindset that motivates us to do whatever it is that we're meant to do with our lives. I don't know if that makes any sense, but anyway, there it is.
I think it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I really love the way that you describe falling in love with the journey, because another thing we talk about a lot is that, you know, ultimately it doesn't matter if I become that thing I want so much or not, right? If I'm successful or not, if I get my book published, right? Like whatever that is, what matters is my level of joy in the path and in the becoming of myself to get closer and closer to this thing. And when you fall in love with that, which is falling in love with yourself and your own growth.
Yes. And it's not narcissism. You know, every
No,
once in a while, someone will call me a narcissist, and I'm just like, oh God. You know, a narcissist is the person at the front of the Starbucks line that's taking 3 days to order their coffee that doesn't have a single coffee bean in it. Meanwhile, there's 20 people standing behind them that just want to get a cup of coffee before they go to work. That's a narcissist. When you love yourself, love is motivating, and people will pick up on those feelings, and you will attract love to yourself as well. At least this has been my experience. I went to Australia earlier this year. I met a woman unfortunately, we've broken up recently, but I mean, I've had all these amazing experiences ever since I reached out to God. And again, it's because of this self-love. Have you seen the movie DOA with Dennis Quaid? It's probably before your time. Anyway, I just want to quote from that movie where it's about a writer, and he's been plagiarized by another writer, another writer who's a very bad guy, stolen the book. And Dennis Quaid says to this guy, he says, it's not about fame. It's not about money. I mean, those things are like, I look at those things like an extra slice of lemon in my beer. I want to make money doing this, but that's not what it's about. That's my goal. It's about the work. It's about the doing. It's about the joy of being a player in this game of life over being a bench warmer and just sitting in the bleachers and throwing stones at a glass house and criticizing. I mean, I used to go to movies. I used to be very ultra critical, and I just don't want to be that guy anymore. I want to be a creator. I want to add to the world and not just second guess what everybody else is doing. I want to follow their example, and I want to be around people who believe in themselves as much as I like to think that I believe in myself.
yeah.
Pardon me.
Yeah, because it's contagious, and energy like that is contagious. And when you're around more people like that, right, you just continue to raise your vibration. And I think ultimately, and maybe this is idealistic or utopian, but I think that positive energy, that being in love with yourself and your life and the people around you, is ultimately what's going to change the world and save the planet, right? Like it has to start here, and then it starts with 2, and then it goes to 3. It's not something that comes big down on us, right? Like we have to grow it and build it, and that's how you grow it, is by being in that vibration.
100%.
But it's hard to talk to people about without sounding totally woo-woo, right?
Yeah. Those people, they're not necessarily bad people. They might have their own great contributions to make. Like they might be able to fix a car. I can't fix a car. They might be able to shingle a roof. But some of those people, and I don't want to stereotype, but some of those people, they just can't see beyond the ends of their noses. They're not visionaries like you and I are. They will look at what you and I are doing, and they'll say, well, there's no guarantee that there's like a big pile of cash at the end of the rainbow. Like if they looked at you studying to be a neurosurgeon, they would respect that. So, oh, she's going to be a neurosurgeon. Well, once she gets her degree, she'll be, help saving people's lives and making tons of money. But you want to be an artist, you want to be a writer or an actor or a dancer or a sculptor or whatever it might be. They're not wired that way. And it's okay, because we're not going to change them. I mean, you can't change other people, but we owe it to ourselves. Now this might be a little bit controversial, but I even think, even if they're family members, we have to distance ourselves sometimes from those people, because their negativity could potentially poison us. It's almost like we have to have our shields up. Like the Enterprise, the Starship Enterprise has the shields up, right? And we only drop those shields for people who have the same like-minded energy. It's really better to be alone than to have people in your life who are undermining, whether it's on purpose or not. And I think sometimes it is on purpose. Like I was in a social situation one time with a group of people that I really loved. And one of them actually said to me, don't talk about your books. And meanwhile, this guy was all too keen to talk about his achievements. He talks about his achievements. He expects everybody to listen. I start talking about my books, doesn't like it, doesn't like it. And so I just don't see that guy very much anymore, even though he's more or less my brother, because time is short, right? This journey that we're on, blink and we're gone. We have to do whatever we can right now, to be whoever it is that we want to be. And my voice is drying out. I think I'm riding on fumes.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for this.
I feel like our culture is, pretty much programming everybody that there's this very narrow, path to success. Like you said, if I was a neurosurgeon, right, I'd get these certain accolades and this certain
Of
respect.
course you would.
But some of us have been lucky enough, for whatever reason, usually bad childhoods and trauma, that didn't put us on that path. And so we're free from this sort of like cultural programming, I feel like,
Right.
that a lot of people have, where we go, no, like, I can define success any way that I want to, right? And what a beautiful gift to be at that stage where you're no longer a slave to ideas that don't suit you and aren't
Yeah.
helping you build a more fulfilling life,
When
right?
we're children,
ultimately, that's what it's about, is you're here, make it as fulfilling as you can for yourself. And it's not
100%.
being selfish, right? Of course,
No.
you look out
Well,
for other people and you
it,
take care of the planet,
it's
but
good selfishness. We
yeah,
have to be a little bit if you're not selfish sometimes and you have no self, there are
yeah,
a lot of selfless people out there who want to help everybody all the time, which is I'm not dismissive of that. But if they're sacrificing what it is that they want to do, then I'm not on board with that. Have you seen the movie It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy
yeah.
Stewart, the classic Christmas movie? It's a beautiful movie, okay? But I can't watch it now because it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart that George Bailey didn't become an architect, because he really, really wanted to be an architect. And so I feel, even though it is a great movie. It's a very, very beautiful, lovely movie. But I want to see the version where he leaves the town and he could have gone back, right? He could have gone back and still saved the town. He could have done both, right? But he sacrifices his dream to help other people who, quite frankly, were masters of their own misfortune.
Mhm.
We have to take responsibility for ourselves. And that's just the way that I feel about it. And
Yeah.
and when we're children, we're just inundated with so much debilitating information. I can't imagine what it's like for kids in the present day with the internet, because I didn't have this stuff growing up, right? But I grew up, and I don't want to throw my parents under the bus too much, because they raised me, they loved me, and I know they'd be super proud of me if they were alive today. But my parents just freaked out over every little hiccup in life. They didn't have the mindset, and so I absorbed a lot of that stuff. And it's basically a choice between fight or flight. Some kids grow up under horrible abuse, and yet they go on to do amazing things with their lives, right? Because they're able to they say, oh, this is mom and dad. I get how life works. Just do the opposite. Just do the opposite of everything that I'm growing up with, right? But some of us are more sensitive, I think, and we absorb that stuff, and so we're struggling all the time to push. Sorry, just spat on the phone again. To push that stuff away, but it's a challenge. It's a challenge for some of us, and
Mhm.
it took me, Mindy, a long time to get where I am now, but it doesn't matter. It's, better now than never, better late than never. That's a part of my mission statement too. And any of your listeners out there who feel the way that I felt about myself back in 2019, for goodness sakes, it's not too late. If it's not too late for me, then it's not too late for anybody. And it's worth it.
Yes. Yes.
And that's my story.
Yes. Well, I want to hear a little bit about your character, but Keith, do you have any questions about sort of these topics before I switch gears and ask about fictional things? Because I want to hear about
Sure.
that too before we go. Is there
Okay.
I absolutely love like what you're saying, like it's not too late. And that's something I'm seeing in so many different places, just on social media stuff, older people talking about that it's not too late, that it's worth it, because a lot of times, we again, like the whole thing with the I'm going to become a neurosurgeon. You have that respect, when you're younger, you're expected to do all of this stuff, and then when you're 40, 50, you're supposed to be at the apex of your career, but there's a joy and a freedom, and at that time changing things up, and going for something like you had said, like the thing that you align with, the passion, absolutely love that. That is such an important message. But I was
Yes.
wondering too about the characters. I was like, because your energy, like, I want to hear about this dude.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah, we're both
Okay.
big story lovers too, like you said.
yeah.
So we get it.
Okay.
So you said it was Lee Ackland? Lee
Lee
Ackland?
Hackman. Right.
Hackman. Okay,
So
so
originally
who
he
is
was
he?
Lee Hackman. Sure. So basically he's an idealized version of myself, which is, I think, something that a lot of writers do. I think that's what Ian Fleming did when he created James Bond, or Stan Lee back in the day when he created Peter Parker / Spider-Man. It's a wish fulfillment. It's like, well, this is me, but much cooler, much more handsome, more of a ladies' man, a braver. And Lee is he's the kind of hero that I grew up with. He's a smoker, he's a drinker, he's kind of a skirt chaser, he's a man's man, but he has a heart of gold, and he loves to help people. And so I just, again, it's a wish fulfillment. So often in life, I feel like we all feel bullied sometimes, whether it's by the government or our coworkers or our employers or maybe our friends or family members. And sometimes we want to act on our feelings of whether it's sticking up for ourselves, but we don't do it. Usually we don't do it because because if we're smart, we realize that that'll just be an escalation. And so writing for me, writing these stories about Lee is very therapeutic. I just have him encounter these really awful, horrible, unsavory people who are doing bad things. And again, I'm writing stories that I feel like Hollywood. I feel like Hollywood is always apologizing for their villains. They're always making these sympathetic, like Loki. They're always making these likable villains. And to me, that's not a villain. A villain is a really, really horrible, awful, bad person who enjoys harming person for no other reason than their own gratification. And a lot of people who I guess have very good hearts, they just can't buy into that notion. You can't have good without evil, in my opinion, just like you can't have day without night. And so writing these stories for me, again, it's just very therapeutic because I was bullied as a boy. I was a Charlie Brown kind of kid growing up. I was a giant. I was usually I don't mean to be, again, beating my chest, but I was very often the biggest kid in class. And I just wanted to be everybody's friend. And so I didn't stick up for myself. And I was bullied at home by my dad. My dad was he was a great provider, but he was a very, my mom and I were walking on eggshells. I always asked my mom, like, why did you marry this man? Seriously, he's a total psycho. He doesn't know how to deal with children. He's impatient. And so, again, a lot of writers like Gene Roddenberry, when he created Star Trek, we're creating worlds that we want to live in. We're creating this sort of fanciful, like, let's say 90% realistic. We try to make my stories as realistic as possible, but we're adding our own perception of how we feel that the world should be. So in all of my stories, good is rewarded, evil is punished. All my stories have happy endings, at least for the good guys. And again, that's the world that I want to live in. And so that's my boy Lee. He's basically me. He's the guy that you're talking to right now. I'm Lee Hackland. He's got more hair than I do. He's got lovely, long, flowing locks. And I based him on Keith. You may remember an actor named Jan Michael Vincent. Do you remember him from
Yep.
Airwolf? Do you remember
Yep.
him? He was like the Brad Pitt of our generation, right?
Yeah,
Super
yeah.
handsome guy, great actor, but could be a tough guy too. Like some actors are like a Leonardo DiCaprio. I think he's a great actor, but I never buy him as a tough guy. It just doesn't work for me. I know I don't mean to be disrespectful, but that's who I base my hero Lee on. And so that's Lee Hackland. He drives a white Dodge Charger, and he's just he's ruthless when it comes to dealing with bullies. And again, I'm writing basically the kinds of stories that I grew up with. And I feel like a lot of writers, they're trying to write what they think is popular. They're trying to cater to a certain market, right? Which is fine if that's what you want to do. Stan Lee back in the day, he was going to quit Marvel Comics and get into advertising right before he created Spider-Man. And the publisher said to him, it's like, Stan, don't quit. What do you want to do? He said, I want to write these stories the way that I want to write them, not the way that you want me to write them. Because the publisher was saying, oh, Stan, you can't use more than one syllable words. There's only children reading this stuff. Or, you have to make the stories, you have to cater to children. You have to cater to write. He's like, no. So once Stan wrote the stories that he wanted to write, and he created these characters, Spider-Man, the Fantastic Four, and they sold like crazy. They sold millions and millions of copies, and now they're all being made into movies and TV shows, and everybody around the world knows who Spider-Man is, all because of one man and his faith, right? Not in what other people wanted, but what he wanted. I mean, look at George Lucas. There's another example, right? Everybody said to George Lucas, what, you want to make a space movie? You want to make a movie about heroes and villains? Nobody wants to see this kind of movie. It's all about the gutter. It's all about naturalism. No, like, again, some people, they can't see into the future. They're not visionaries. You have to be a visionary. And if you have an idea, everyone in your inner circle might think that it's total garbage. That doesn't mean that it's a bad idea. That just means that the people around you, they don't get whatever it is that you're trying to create. So I have it in my mind's eye that before I die, I'm going to connect with that one person, my Alan Ladd Jr. He was the executive at Fox who greenlit Star Wars. He and George Lucas had this conversation about the stories that they grew up with, the Green Hornet and the Shadow and these old radio shows you listen to, and the chapter plays, the movie serial. I want to bring that back. So Alan Ladd Jr. is like, here you go, George, here's $8 million. Go make your stupid space movie that's going to sink this studio, that's going to sink my career, that's going to be a total bomb. And lo and behold, it became Star Wars. And how many people are working today in jobs related to Star Wars? Like thousands of people, right? Thousands. Writers, actors, set designers, costume designers, the people who make the video games, write the comic books, draw the comic books, right? All of those people have jobs that they love to do. Why? Because of one man and his faith in his idea, never minding what other people think. It's an important life lesson, right?
Oh, so important. And I
Yeah.
love the way that you described it. I think that's what art is. It's like we get to live out the versions of ourselves or expressions of ourselves that can't come into this world. So whether we do it through writing or painting or whatever we do, there has to be a way for this other stuff, right, to have life. And what is dangerous in the world right now is when you have Hollywood or like a big force saying, well, we only want this to be these two colors, right? Beige or brown. All the art has to look beige or brown. You're
Right.
really limiting this self-expression that is the genius of the world, right? It's like the heart pumping of the world. And so that is one reason I love the internet, because the internet has and will continue to allow people to go into weird niches and make a living. And for people to support people, right? And listen to their podcasts and tip their social media accounts and all those little tiny ways that we are supporting each other outside of this big agenda, right, of capitalism and the way it has previously been. And it's brilliant. It's so cool to see that happening.
Well, you as an American and me as a Canadian, we're so lucky that we're living in the so-called developed nations, because there are a lot of people around the world, and I don't want to get political, but they kind of lost the lottery. They lost the lottery of life in advance, unless they can get out. There's so many people, they wake up every morning, there's another civil war, there's tribalism, there's violence, religious wars and political wars. Not that where we're living are, like you said, they're not utopias, they're not perfect, but on a comparative scale, we certainly have a lot of wiggle room to be who we want to be, whereas a lot of people are really out of luck. And so we really owe it to ourselves to take advantage of these wonderful opportunities that so many people don't have.
So true. And if anybody is looking for a source of gratitude, like there it is. People always say, like, do a gratitude journal, say something you're grateful for every day. And then I know so many people struggle with that, like coming up with new things. And I'm just always so in awe of this human experience, and in awe, like you said, that I'm living here, that I'm not in a civil war. Like when you look around the world just becomes this fascinating place to be in, right? And
yeah, you're right.
So many things to be grateful for and to experience and impact. It's a pretty amazing to be consciousness in a human body. That's wild, man. Like, why is anybody fighting this experience?
Yeah.
Like when you dig into it, it's cool.
100%. No, I agree 100%.
Yeah, so great.
So I have plug. I have another series called The Urban Tiger, which I feel like I'm kind of finished with, and it's basically, have you seen the movie Kick-Ass about the boy who wants to be a superhero? It was a movie that came out a couple of years ago. I think they did a Kick-Ass too, And so I remember when the Kick-Ass comic book came out, it really broke my heart because I had this idea for such a long time about a boy. You know, superheroes always have very dramatic motivation. Like Bruce Wayne, his parents were murdered. That's why he becomes Batman, right? Or Superman is sent to Earth to redeem humanity. I thought, what if a kid who's a comic book nerd, as I was, and still am a little bit, what if he just decided to put on a mask and run around trying to be a good Samaritan? And so when I read this comic book, I thought, you know what? I want to do this. And it's an important life lesson too. Whatever it is that you want to create, it's been done before. There's a version of it that's been done before. But that you're doing it, or that I'm doing it, or Keith, or any of your listeners, that's what makes it different. I remember a book I read back in the day called The Sword of Shannara by Terry Brooks. And I remember, and it was a huge bestseller. It spun off a whole bunch of sequels and TV show. And I remember reading this book thinking, well, this guy just read Lord of the Rings, and he's changed the names of the characters. And instead of a ring, it's a sword. But you know what? I didn't care. That didn't take away from my pleasure of reading the book, because he probably read Lord of the Rings, thought, you know what, I want to do this. I want to do my version of the story. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know, if you want to tell a story about a boy who lives in a farm and he goes off to fight an evil empire, if that's the story you want to write, you just tell people, yes, this was inspired by Star Wars. You just tell people that. It's like I wrote a 2-part science fiction series called The Taking of Red Star 1. There's 2 books. It's a sci-fi series. And it's basically the Hunt for Red October meets Star Trek. And I freely admit, without the Hunt for Red October by Tom Clancy, those books don't exist. And I hope Tom Clancy up in heaven, I hope that he's flattered by that. You know, George Lucas, when he wrote the original Star Wars, he based the first scene on a Japanese samurai movie called The Seven Samurai. And if you watch The Seven Samurai, there's 2 guys wandering through the desert, moaning and groaning about their lot in life, just like C-3PO and R2-D2. Some of the dialogue is even the same. We seem to be made to suffer. And Akira Kurosawa, who wrote The Hidden Fortress, you know, he could have sued George Lucas. He could have, but he didn't. He was flattered. You know, and again, you just come. I think the important thing is you just come out in advance and you just tell people, yes. You know, one of my Lee Hacklins is called Romantic Fanatic, and it's about a male writer of women's romance novels, and he's kidnapped by an obsessive fan. That story sounds familiar. It was a Stephen King book called Misery. But when you have this idea and you keep obsessing over it, then I just follow through. So by the time I finished Romantic Fanatic, there's really only one chapter that's a little bit like Misery, but the rest of it is its own thing. It was just my starting point, my inspiration point. So I've had people say to me since I started doing this, you know, I want to write too, but I don't have any original ideas. And I'm like, you know, if I had that attitude, you'd be interviewing somebody else right now, right? I mean, I could have said to myself, oh, why would I tell a series of private detective stories? You go into a bookstore, you go to the mystery section, there's already 8 million books on the shelf about private detectives. So what? It doesn't matter. There's never been one written by me. That's what makes the difference, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Makes
I
a
think
lot of sense.
that is such a powerful message. It's okay to copy someone you admire, right?
Well, I don't see it so much as copying. I see it as more inspiring.
Right.
You know, before Star Wars, there was Flash Gordon, there was Buck Rogers. Before Batman, there was the Phantom, there was Zorro. You know, the guys who created Batman back in the day, they thought, oh, we can't do this. You know, he's a millionaire who dresses up in a mask and a cape and night. Well, there was already Zorro that came before Batman. They said, no, we want to do this. And you know, how many Batman movies have been made over the last few years? How many people have jobs that are Batman related, that love what they're doing, because these guys, Bill Finger and Bob Kane, had the guts, you know, to create this character, even though something similar had come before.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, so much. And yeah, it's such a great message.
Thank you.
I was just thinking about how I actually like that stories are copied over and over again, because like the whole kids in school that know some kind of magic that grow up and have to fight somebody, right? Like a coming of age. I'll freaking read every story that is written with that.
That's what you like.
Because I am right. There's something about me and my experience here that hooks to that storyline. I don't know what it, but I have 10, 20, 30 storylines like that, right? That I want to always have in my life because I like the fantasy of that particular storyline. So I'm
Are
like,
you a Harry? Do you like
please,
Harry Potter?
I
Are you a
love
Harry Potter
Harry
fan?
Potter, totally.
Okay, cool, awesome, good for you.
Yeah.
That's
Hey,
great.
my husband makes fun of me because he's like, are you shopping in the young adult section again for books? And I'm like, yes, because
Yeah.
these stories rock.
Yeah, never. See, you're lucky you're living in the present day, because in my generation back in the 70s, the fact that I liked comic books, I'm surprised I wasn't stoned to death, like the Salem witch trials, burned at the stake, because there are just a lot of people out there. They think you're a weirdo because you're wearing an orange t-shirt and everybody else is wearing a purple t-shirt. And I remember feeling every time I walked into a magazine store to buy my comic books, I felt like a dirty old man. I felt like I was buying porn, and I didn't want anybody to know. It's just completely ridiculous. The more we think about what other people think about us, the less motivated we'll be. Once we cut all that stuff off, it's like boom. It's like, here I am. I'm the center of the universe. This is what I can do. It makes me happy to do it. And then you just do it. And then you're off and running. And whatever comes ahead that is good or maybe not so good, you just accept it and advance. And again, I want to remind your listeners out there, anyone out there. Oh, by the way, I don't use Amazon anymore for my books. I use Draft2 Digital, and it's an amazing website. And what they Draft2 Digital with the number 2. Anybody out there who wants to do what I'm doing, become a self-published author, what they do is it's super easy to use, it's free, and they springboard your books to other platforms. So all my books are on Barnes & Noble and Kobo and Apple, and there's five or six other platforms. I'm just keeping an eye on my stuff. And then there's another website, and there's another website I use called Poster My Wall, and that's how I design my book covers. And again, it's free, it's super easy to use, and it's only over the last year or so that I actually have covers for my books. And again, I know I've said this before, I'm repeating myself, but when we start on something new in our lives, you have to imagine that it's not always going to be smooth sailing. There's going to be choppy water sometimes. There's going to be unanticipated hiccups.
Yes.
You need help. Drop your ego. And I feel like this is, I don't mean to be sexist, but I feel like this is more of a guy thing. Men in our egos. We want to do everything by ourselves, right? We don't want to ask for directions, right? We want to be men, gall darn it. Well, if I hadn't put my ego on the shelf and asked people to help me, like, you would be interviewing somebody else right now. If it wasn't for the wonderful library staff who helped me get that first book online, but you also have to demonstrate to people, and again, it's just my opinion, that you're worth helping. Have you ever helped someone and then thought after that you wasted your time? Have you ever had that experience? I've had this experience, and maybe some people have felt this way about me. You have to show people that you're passionate, that you're sincere, that this is what you want, and you have to be patient, right? And if they do help you, then you might want to buy them a coffee after or something. You might want to give them a token of your appreciation. So over the last 5 years, I didn't discover my bliss. I always knew that this was my bliss, but I've embraced it, and I'm enjoying the journey of my life infinitely more than the way I was living it before, just being a couch potato. My only regret is that I didn't reach out to God sooner. But again, we have to live our lives in the present. There's no going back. There's no point in worrying about the future. I mean, an asteroid could land on Earth today and destroy the whole human race. And I remember back in the 80s, me and my friends, we all thought about nuclear war. All the Russians and the Americans, they have nukes. They're going to fire the nukes, and the world is going to be a nuclear wasteland. And so there's no point, right? There's no point in going to university. There's no point in manifesting. Let's just go out and get drunk. Let's just go to bars every night. And I did a lot of that when I was a younger man. I still do some of that. But when I go to the bar now on my days off, I feel like when I have my beer, I do drink beer on my days off, Saturday, Sunday. I feel like I earned it. I feel like, you know what? I earned this. I worked really hard this week. My job is very physically demanding. I'm writing. I'm reaching out to nice people like yourself. I have a group page. My Facebook group page is called Johnny's Way. Over 700 members. Everybody, please feel free to join. And once or twice a week, I write what I like to think are uplifting and inspirational essays about believing in yourself and self-manifestation. I took a picture of myself holding a book by a writer named Mike Madden. He writes the Jack Ryan series. You know Jack Ryan? He took over from a Tom Clancy. He's one of the writers who took over after Tom Clancy passed away. Well, I took a picture of myself holding one of his books. This guy's a best-selling author, okay? I don't mean to brag about this, but I posted it on his Facebook page, and I told him about my group page, Johnny's Way. Well, guess what? He joined. This guy who's a best-selling author. I'm a security guard, right? Right? He joined
That's
my
awesome.
Facebook. How wild is that? This is the world that we're living in. And I'm always telling people, particularly people who are our age, maybe I think, Keith, you and I are around the same age. I'm 50. Take advantage of this technology. You know, you meet the most amazing people. Again, people who have your energy, and you might meet someone that you spend the rest of your life with. You might meet someone who can open doors for you that would otherwise remain unlocked, that would remain locked. And I'm so glad. We're living in a golden age. I mean, if I was living in the 1970s, I would be sending my stuff in the mail where it would just wind up in somebody's fireplace as kindling. At least my stuff is out there now, right? DIY, do it yourself. I thank God that this stuff exists. I thank God for all the people that created it. And it's you're where you are, and I'm in Vancouver, and it's like we're in the same room.
Yeah.
It was wonderful, right? It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's such a cool time to be alive.
It is.
It was funny when you were talking about asking for help and then giving appreciation. I was thinking, those interactions, it's like the Velcro of humanity. Like when you ask for help and you give appreciation and you start, like, that's the weaving that connects us all, right? And so when we don't ask for help or give help, like even if the library, like a stranger, when we stop doing that with each other, the fabric of humanity, it gets thinner, right? It's not as strong. And now that we have the internet and all of us can connect with people who are like-minded, the power of that, like the possible power of that's even stronger, right? To find the people who really can help you and who you can really help, and you're on the same mission in this world. And that's an exciting thing.
Yeah. A lot of people, and I used to do this when I was a younger man, they moan and groan about all the strife of the world. They moan and groan about war and violence and their pet peeves. It's like, wait a second. Instead of moaning and groaning about what's beyond your control, why don't you start thinking and talking about what's within your control and then act upon that? And never mind, I'm on a website called Enterprise Zone, and they plug, and they send me a question once a week. And so I answer the question. The most recent question was, if you had to stop doing what you're doing, like writing, and you could do something like globally, what would you do? And I said, I wouldn't do anything, because what's going on globally is not part of my mission statement. It's not that I don't care. I do care. But if I start thinking globally, then I'll just feel weak inside, right? And I don't want to feel weak inside. I want to feel strong. And so I will never stop writing. Even if my arms and legs fell off, I would still write. I would figure out a way to do it, because it's my bliss. It's what I was meant to do. I mean, there's a guy out there right now hammering nails all day, or a woman, God bless them, and they love doing that. They're making buildings. I can't do that stuff. I mean, I could if push came to shove, but I would have to will myself to do it. And this is this is something that we haven't touched upon. Will. When you have to will yourself to do something, then you probably shouldn't do it. But when it comes naturally to you, that's when you know that you're on track. And I've discovered since 2019, Mindy and Keith, that writing for me is as natural as eating, sleeping, and breathing. I don't claim to be good at it. I know my stories aren't great literature. They are what they are. But the joy, the exhilaration that it gives me to do it and to share with other people, and the reaction that I get, which is mostly positive, you can't put a price on that. There's no amount of money in the world that can match that feeling that I have, and that other people who are doing what I'm doing, that they have. It doesn't have to be writing. It could be like yourself doing a podcast or whatever it is. The feeling that it gives you, again, you just want to keep feeling that way. And you have faith that down the road, it can pay off financially. But if it doesn't, if the Lee Hackland streaming series never happens, it doesn't matter, because at least I'm going for it. Right? Yeah. There's no guarantee when Rocky Balboa gets into the ring. There's no guarantee that he's going to win the fight. Right? The point is, he's getting into the ring. He's taking the hits. We do have. One of my favorite lines of dialogue in the history of movies is when Rocky Balboa says to his son, "You have to take the hits in life and keep moving forward." Because what's the alternative?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for today. I
Thank
have
you.
just really loved this conversation, and
I'm
it
sorry if
has
I talked your ears off. Your ears are still on your head, are they? Hard to
been
tell
so
on
Yeah,
your
yeah,
much
head.
we're
fun.
good.
Yeah.
Thank you. I
And
appreciate
just
it.
so that listeners know too, if you email me like all your links and stuff and for all your stuff, I'll make sure that gets in the show notes. So everybody look below and click and they can find you in all your places. Um, Keith, did you have anything to add before we wrapped it up last minute?
Hey,
I think that's about it. I mean, if you go on YouTube and if you type in John Leister, you can check out some of the podcasts that I've been on. It's pretty much the same stuff. My email is John Leister, small letters, JOHNLEISTER 611 at hotmail.com. And I would be happy, time permitting, because I do have a full-time job and I've done this, time permitting, I would be more than happy. I mean, I want to make money doing this ultimately, but I want to ring that bell. But it's also about sharing. And I would be more than happy to email anyone one of my short stories or one of my books if they're interested. And as I said, my group page is Johnny's Way. Everybody out there, please feel free to join. And if you want to post something, as long as it's okay. So some people do post some bad, and I remove them. I remove that. I know that's the thing. You know, I remove that stuff right away. And basically that's it. Oh, and if you go to Kobo or Barnes and Noble or Indigo, and if you type in John Leister, you'll see all of my books, and most of them are excerpted, and most of them are around 99 cents. And,
Awesome.
and as I said, if anyone wants a copy of one, I'd be more than happy to email one. And so that's basically the whole shebang.
Awesome. Thank you.
yeah, man, you are a whirlwind of energy that is so good and so positive and like attractive, man. You know what I mean?
Thank
Like
you.
I feel energized just listening to you talk about this and the self-awareness and the wisdom in the stuff that you were saying. I freaking love it, man.
Thank you so much. You're very kind.
Yeah,
And those feelings are reciprocated.
I appreciate it. Yeah, this is awesome.
Cheers.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Keith and Mindy. Have a great day.
See you,
Bye.
John.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Chasing Thoughts podcast. Please support us by liking, subscribing, or leaving a review or comment. We would really appreciate it. If you'd like to be a guest, we would love to explore life and what it means to be human with you. Please email us at chasingthoughtspodcast@gmail.com.